On January 28, 1986, the world watched the Space Shuttle Challenger's highly publicized launch. And only 73 seconds after it lifted off from Cape Canaveral, Florida, the Space Shuttle Challenger's fuel tank exploded, losing all contact of the Challenger and its crew. NASA's mission control in Houston were in frustration combined with confusion, while the public was astonished at what they were seeing. Today we are going over the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, an 80s moment where everyone who was alive remembers.
And I want to say something to the school children of America who are watching the live coverage of the shuttle's takeoff. I know it's hard to understand, but sometimes painful things like this happen. It's all part of the process of exploration and discovery. It's all part of taking a chance and expanding man's horizons. The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
The flight crew of Space Shuttle Challenger included Commander Dick Scobie, Ellison Onizuka, a mission specialist who was an expert in tracking and data relay satellite. Next was mission specialist Ron McNair, who was an expert in start and Halley. McNair was tasked with controlling Challenger's robotic arm to release and retrieve a satellite to observe Halley's comet. Michael Smith was pilot and backed up Commander Scobie as well. Dr. Judith Resnick was the flight engineer who was one of the most educated about the orbiter in NASA. Greg Jarvis, a payload specialist assigned by Hughes Aircraft Company that was going to perform a flight dynamics experiment on board. Lastly, Krista McAuliffe was the payload specialist who was going to perform teacher activities in space. This occurrence stunned the nation, the world, and became a defining moment for American history for 2 generations and the decade of the 1980s. Classrooms and households all witnessed a tragedy together. Back to January 1986. The National Aeronautics Space Administration was working with the shuttle for years before the STS-51L Challenger mission. Originally a test vehicle, Space Shuttle Challenger was built in 1975 for the Space Shuttle program. It would later be transformed into a Space Shuttle travel vehicle, 4 years later in 1979. Then in 1983, the shuttle was used for NASA's first spacewalk. After that, it was used on June 18, 1983, for Challenger's STS-7 mission to send the first female into space, the one and only Sally Ride. Then 2 months later, on August 30, 1983, in Challenger 8, the shuttle took up Guion Buford, the first African-American to fly into space. So Challenger was the first to do several things before it was soon to have the first teacher in space. Krista McAuliffe. On a side note, Challenger was also taking up Ellison Onizuka back up to space for the second time, who the year before became the first Asian American to fly in space when he flew in Space Shuttle Discovery. McAuliffe was a 37-year-old social studies teacher from New Hampshire's Concord High School, and by then was highly in the media, even for the 80s. Kids in all schools knew her, and everyone was tuning in for the event, given that NASA provided satellite feed for many schools to watch. McAuliffe was a family household name at that point with no social media at all. The plan called for Krista to accompany the astronauts in space and teach a few lessons while in space. A few mishaps were made by NASA management that could have prevented the launch and disaster. The engineering contractors, Morton Thiokol, aka MTI, warned NASA of a possible issue the day before the launch and the morning of the launch. Roger Boisjoli was the one who brought attention of it, the evening before the launch first, at a meeting.
I did make notes on the 27th about the events of that time.
Yes, I did. I made them after the meeting.
You made them after, but on the same day?
Yes, and then I made a few more notes on the day of the launch.
And you have
prior to the launch, and then I made a short entry after the launch. If erosion penetrates the primary O-ring seal, it's a high probability of no secondary seal capability in a steady state condition. And I had 2 sub-bullets under that which stated, bench testing showed O-ring not capable of maintaining contact with metal parts, gap opening rate to maximum operating pressure. I had another bullet which stated, bench testing showed capability to maintain O-ring contact during initial phase, parentheses, 0 to 170 milliseconds of transient. That was my comfort basis of continuing to fly under normal circumstances, normal being within the database we had.
This was disregarded until the temperature the morning of the launch were estimated to be 30 degrees Fahrenheit. There was a previous flight that had morning temperatures in the 30s the night before, but the temperature rose to the 60s in the morning. So this would be the coldest launch time that a shuttle would ever have had. MTI had a meeting with NASA to further discuss their concern.
By now, we heard that the overnight low was predicted to be 18 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, my concern deepened. So we spoke out and tried to explain once again the effects of low temperature. Arnie actually got up from his position, which was down the table, walked up the table, put a quad pad down in front of the table, in front of the management folks, and tried to sketch out once again what his concern was with the joint. And when he realized he wasn't getting through, he just stopped. I tried one more time with the photos. I grabbed the photos and I went up and discussed the photos once again and tried to make the point that it was my opinion from actual observations that temperature was indeed a discriminator, and we should not ignore the physical evidence that we had observed. It was about that time that Mr. Hardy from Marshall was asked what he thought about the MTI recommendation, and he said he was appalled at the MTI decision. After Arnie and I had our last say, Mr. Mason said, "We have to make a management decision." He turned to Bob Lund and asked him to take off his engineering hat and put on his management hat. From this point on, management formulated the points to base their decision on. There was never one comment in favor, as I've said, of launching by any engineer or other non-management person in the room before or after the caucus. I was not even asked to participate in giving any input to the final decision charts.
And so, the launch proceeded, even though temperatures were at an all-time low, and engineers felt that the primary and secondary O-rings in the right solid rocket boosters were not capable in their current condition. An overnight measurement was taken, and the Kennedy Space Center team recorded the left solid rocket booster at 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and the right solid rocket booster at 8 degrees. So the effect on the O-rings was evident. But on top of that, the cold temperatures caused ice to form on the fixed service structure after water was slowly draining from the pipes in order to keep them from freezing. Rockwell's space transportation head, Rocco Petrone, warned that this ice is a hazard and could cause potential damage. But engineers at the Johnson Space Center confirmed that it was safe to proceed with the launch. Because of the cold, the launch was delayed another hour. By T-minus 20 minutes, the temperature was at 36 degrees, where ice was melting, yet still far below 53 degrees, which was the recommended low temperature to launch. Launching in freezing temperature caused heated gas to escape from the rocket and vaporize the material that connected the solid rocket booster to the shuttle's tank. This created a deadly combination of liquid oxygen and nitrogen gas. And at 47,000 feet, the tank exploded. This caused the shuttle's fuel tank to turn into a massive fireball. But the shuttle kept moving, as the solid rocket boosters were unaffected and the Challenger shuttle continued to shoot up higher. NASA astronaut Dr. Story Musgrave said that the Challenger crew survived during the explosion. It was Challenger's fuel tank that exploded. The shuttle just broke apart, and the crew compartment with its 7 crew members was intact. The initial path of the crew compartment through the vapor cloud carried it across the path of an adjacent contrail, clearly revealing its truncated form and attitude. The left wing became visible at 78.5 seconds. The main engines and crew cabin were also identifiable. As mentioned, it took 2 minutes and 45 seconds for the crew to drop. 47,000 feet to the ocean, landing at 207 miles per hour. The forces to which the crew were exposed during orbiter breakup were probably not sufficient to cause death or serious injury. NASA is unable to determine positively the cause of death of the Challenger astronauts, but has established that it is possible, but not certain, that loss of consciousness did occur in the seconds following the orbiter breakup. Medical doctor, surgeon came to the conclusion.
Died when you hit the water. You know that?
You think so? That's always been controversial.
I don't know, sir. There's nothing controversial about that. No. It's hard evidence. Yeah, he died when you hit the water.
So there are two questions. Why did the Challenger explode? And why wasn't it prevented? The reason for explosion was simply because of ignoring the warning of O-ring failure and low temperature launching. So the second question many ask is, why were the warnings from the previous evening and the morning or the launch ignored? This is an answer related to the government. NASA was focusing on reaching goals that were pressured on them by the government. So the launch was done because NASA was trying to keep up with 24 launches per year and reach goals it had set. It was trying to keep the Space Shuttle program alive and funded, so it was being pushed too hard, beyond their capabilities. So it ignored the contractor's advice that went on with the mission, having the overall space program in mind. And in the end, it needed to slow down its pace. This is when the Rogers Commission was formed. It was a presidential panel led by William Rogers that consisted of high-profile astronauts like Neil Armstrong and Sally Ride, built to help look over the decisions and prevent future mishaps. And it was very effective. Not until over 2 decades later was there another issue. In 2003, when there was Space Shuttle Columbia's issue burning up during re-entry mode. Some interesting facts that people may not know about. There was another traveler who was supposed to be on the flight. This was Big Bird from Sesame Street. Carol Spinney, who performed as Big Bird on Sesame Street, was also contacted by NASA to come to space in the Challenger with McAuliffe. But the plan was not approved in the end by Mission Control. Clear Lake High School is the closest high school to Mission Control. Ellison Onizuka's daughter Janelle was on the soccer team then, and Ellison actually took his daughter's soccer ball, signed by the 1986 Clear Lake High School soccer girls and boys teams, on the flight. And after the landing, the ball actually survived, making it home to be stored as a memoir in Clear Lake High School. 30 years later, however, astronaut Colonel Shane Kimbrough took the ball back up to space with the NASA Space Station Expedition 50 crew and tweeted a picture of it down less than a week after the 30-year anniversary of Challenger. Onizuka and Kimbrough are both Clear Lake High School dads who had kids as members of sports teams there, with children who are Clear Lake High School Falcons. And Onizuka's daughter Janelle is a Falcon mom. Kimbrough also formally gave the ball back to the Onizuka family at a Clear Lake High School soccer game.
This ball has been on quite a journey, over 73 million miles. It's orbited our planet 2,768 times. It's been in every module of the International Space Station. And now it's my distinct honor to present it back to the Onizuka family.
I would also like to present to Clear Lake High School a signed photo of the crew. And it is very special because there's not very many of them. But I'd like very much for Clear Lake High to have this.
This was an unfortunate moment in history and a lesson learned, yet a moment in time never to be forgotten. and a piece of us all. Where were you and who were you with when it happened? If you are feeling nostalgic right now, then you were most likely in school watching. And it's a somber moment for us all. The mistakes were made, however, and it is great to see that since then, the improvements have been made and maintained as well. We hope you enjoyed this documentary on the STS-51L Space Shuttle Challenger. So, at this moment, we would like to wish love to the Scobie family, love to the Onizuka family, love to the Resnick family, love to the McNair family, love to the Smith family, love to the Jarvis family, and love to the McAuliffe family. We hope you enjoyed our trip down memory lane of the Challenger. Please click the like and subscribe buttons for future 80s nostalgia videos. 80s forever.